Great, thanks, and welcome everybody here on the panel. All right. So to start off, I think as we go through the panel here, if you have questions, just raise your hand. I'm going to try to acknowledge you. We got mics in the room, and somebody will bring one by so you can ask the question. I'll keep my eye on you all. Don't be shy. Raise your hand if you have a question. Welcome to the panelists. I want just each of you to go quickly down the line and introduce yourselves, introduce your project, please.
What's up, y'all? I'm Ben, project called Optimism. Coinbase uses the stack as of last week. Let's go. Woo. And I like music.
Awesome. Sergey, co-founder of Axelar, working on interoperability.
Hey everyone, I'm Steven Goldfeder, co-founder and CEO of Offchain Labs, which is the company that's building Arbitrum, the leading roll-up on Ethereum.
Hello, my name is Alex Gluchowski. I'm co-founder and CEO of Moderator Labs, which is a company behind ZK Sync. We're building a ZK VM rollup.
I'm Jordi Baylina. I'm the technical lead at Polygon ZK VM, and yeah, we're launching next week. Yeah, so next week, next month.
Great. So
if everything goes okay.
So let's start out with just kind of a general question. Why don't we start with you, Ben? What are rollups? What are the different approaches involved in rollups? Kind of outline the space, if you can.
Oh man, that is an interesting question because honestly, our intuitions I think have continued to improve over time. So what I think fundamentally, most importantly, what a rollup is. A rollup is describing a chain which we build by putting some data somewhere. And usually when we're talking about this, we're talking about L1 Ethereum. And we use the data being put somewhere to derive the inputs to a chain. I think what you're alluding to, which is actually a thing that we're trying to avoid with the OP stack in terms of introducing more modularity, is that also you have different proof systems that you can build on top of these rollups, be it like a simple multi-sig, be it a ZK proof, be it an optimistic or fault proof. And so obviously there are some different designs you can make there in terms of proofs. Fundamentally, what's a rollup? It's just throwing some data on chain.
Got it. Okay, so Jordi, I see you smiling. Thoughts on this? Like, what the different approaches, like, can be avoided? Is this a problem?
I mean, what's clear is that rollups. So for many, let me tell you one thing. For many years, scaling blockchains has been a huge topic and has been difficult. And nobody knew there were ideas, state channels and the ideas on how to do these things, but there were really not really solution. People didn't see how to do it. And it was with this introduction of this idea, of this concept of rollups, that actually we see the light and we see how the scale. And when we start working in rollups, there were a different approach. It was something new. There were no rollups at some point. So here, all the projects here, we just started with different approaches and comes from different sides, different architectures, different technical things, different balances. We learn a lot, and we have different paths. And that's why it's good, because having many projects, having different approach, different ways to understand. At the end, the users, the market, will see what are the best ones, what are the worst ones. But that's fine. That's okay. The good thing is that we are trying, that we are moving, that we are learning one each other, and this is what makes this space great. That having all these projects, just trying different approaches.
Sort of the innovation of rollups in general as a baseline has been an improvement on the scaling discussion, and we have a lot of different approaches now that we can discuss, right?
Yeah.
I guess let's get into it a little bit then. Steven, Arbitrum, kind of your approach on the rollup with rollups as a baseline. How does Arbitrum differentiate?
Yeah, so Arbitrum differentiates itself by we take security first. So modularity is nice, but you have to actually have an implementation of your security and of the security stack. And so Arbitrum from day one of our testnet, security has always been first, and EVM compatibility has always been up there with it. So we are building a secure scaling solution for Ethereum, which is fully compatible with all of your tooling and everything you've done previously. But we're also saying, hey, how can we innovate in the rollup as well, right? So one thing we've announced recently is adding C and C++ and Rust to rollup, because we don't have to be limited by that environment. We can actually innovate in rollups faster as well. So for us, security is key, and we have a thriving ecosystem, but also we say, how can we attract more people to this ecosystem and give them more tools and more resources to really bring more and more users and developers into the fold?
I guess not to sort of last but not least, but Alex on the ZK on the ZK Sync front, what does zero knowledge proofs have to bring into this discussion? What's new there? This is kind of, I think, right, emerging technology. A lot of people are very excited about where it can go, not just in this discussion, but in others as well. Where do you see that contributing to the ecosystem here in ZK Sync?
So zero knowledge proofs are actually the only technology which allows us to completely break out of the blockchain trilemma, at least with some aspects of computational aspects of scalability. And we don't really use zero knowledge, the ZK part of these protocols in what we're doing. We're using the computational integrity part, the validity proofs. But zero knowledge can be used to add privacy. So that's one obvious huge advantage. But the other one is you can just, it gives you much better usability properties. Much faster finality, hard finality, and you can get many chains running together and make them smoothly interoperable by using zero knowledge proofs, recursive zero knowledge proofs specifically.
Are there advantages to using zero knowledge proofs or rollups in general beyond scalability?
So the interoperability is a great use case because when you have two different systems talking to each other, you need to provide, like one system has to trust the other one based on some objective criteria. With people, you can observe some behavior and say like, okay, I trust this system. Maybe there is a set of validators who I trust, or maybe there was like I see some transactions, as in case of optimistic rollups. If it's you put transaction on chain, you know it's final as a human, but not as a system, not as a machine. So zero knowledge proofs give you the hard guarantee that something is valid and is final and is verified, that machines can use to check. So you can build a network of trust rather than relying on some human game theoretical measures to guarantee this trust.
I'm curious about sort of generally in the Ethereum ecosystem, maybe Sergey, this is a good question for you. We think of it as a very interoperable ecosystem within which to work, right? Different dApps, different tokens can interact. But maybe that's changed a little bit as Ethereum has gone more into an L2, sort of multi-chain, if you will, type of approach. What is the state of interoperability in Ethereum today?
Yeah, so I think if you take actually a step back and look from a different lens of what a different layer 2 is, right? From my perspective, like we're trying to connect all the different ecosystems. So if you abstract that away, you can think of a layer 2 as its own chain that has a bridge to Ethereum that uses that bridge for certain properties, right? Maybe it's security, maybe it's like data transmission, and so on and so forth. And then we have, I guess, like different ways that bridge is instantiated to Ethereum, right? But on the higher level, you're creating sort of another system that needs to talk with other systems in a probably asynchronous way, right? So you kind of send in messages from one layer 2 to another layer 2, or you're trying to compose applications across them. So usually the same problems that we see across different layer 1s when it comes to fragmentation, liquidity and kind of composability of them. Very, very similar problems are arising across layer 2s. You can do a little bit better because you have some shared state on Ethereum itself. But when it comes to, I would say, application build-outs, right? How the applications interact with multiple ecosystems at the same time, we're still in very, very early phases, and we're still trying to figure it out via various primitives like account abstractions and so on and so forth.
So we've started to solve the scalability problem, but we may be making some sacrifices on the interoperability front in order to do that.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable, right, that we started with a world where everything was synchronous, everything was done in the same execution environment, right? To scale, we do need all these different technologies, right? We do need to have different resource isolation between applications. We do need to have different properties that developers can rely on, but that introduces asynchronous that you have to deal with across all of these different stacks. And so we're trying to kind of figure out how do you deal with these then systems that have to communicate in an asynchronous way.
Ben, do you think that's a problem for Ethereum's narrative? Like, does that kind of ruin the story?
For the narrative, no, because I'm optimistic. It always happens.
In a zero knowledge way?
I mean, look. Yeah, exactly. No, it's succinct actually. Yeah, common misnomer. So I don't know. I don't want to just like do the shill thing, but like there's an obvious opportunity here for me to say that the second OP stack chain Base was announced last week, being created by Base, and our goal with that is the super chain, Optimism.io/superchain. Go check it out. So what our general philosophy on this is that it is absolutely not a failure of the Ethereum vision or going to be some collapsing moment. But it's also true that we're at a moment in time, I think like Sergey said, where we are fracturing and we haven't built out the tooling and the interoperability that we need if we're going to make all of this work. So I think we will have failed the vision if in 10 years you're still thinking about like the chain ID or the network RPC, or realistically even something as fundamental as what chain you're on. It's like saying that the internet, I want to think about what tier 3 provider am I on, what tier 2 internet service provider, what is my tier 1, and how, right?
Think about that.
It all needs to go away into the background. So I don't think it's a failure of Ethereum unless we go and fix it. Optimism.io/superchain.
What's the superchain?
Superchain is a set of L2s building together, not apart, using a shared standard, the OP stack, to try to maximize your interoperability.
I'm curious, actually, to think about just in general, kind of the state of Ethereum today. And maybe, Steven, you can answer this question because you were just talking about sort of making things easier for developers, right? What is it like building inside? I mean, I could say I think I've had a lot of conversations with Cosmos developers. It's not, you know, it's not all wine and roses. What is it like building in Ethereum today in this environment?
Yeah, so from a developer perspective, EVM has become essentially, you know, the standard, and there's for good reason. You know, it's nothing bad to say about the EVM. And in fact, we are and will always be, you know, based fundamentally on the EVM. But there is a question of those are the developers that are here today. Sometimes you don't realize how small. You know, there are a lot of people here, but the community is still very, very small. And there are companies out there, there are people out there, and there's just a lot of knowledge and libraries and other languages. So the question is, how can we, you know, expand that to them? And that's, you know, our vision with that. And when it comes to the other big thing, which you hit on before, is the interoperability part is hard for developers, which is like, hey, I want to launch my DeFi project on Arbitrum, but I also want to be able to go back to Ethereum. I also want to bridge to some layer 2. So I actually believe that, you know, we do need standards of interoperability. I disagree with the approach that one company should develop something called a superchain and define it as the standard that connects OP chains. I think we have just on stage here, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, and 4 rollup providers. And this should be a community collaborative effort to say, how do we build something that's interoperable with all of our technologies, not how does one project come and define that this is the standard, and by the way, this is the standard for OP chains. If you want to be the standard, you should build an OP chain. So I think there's a massive opportunity, but it has to be one that follows the Ethereum ethos of collaboration. And I'm, you know, in awe to be in the presence of other amazing builders. And right now, none of our technologies talk to each other. And I wouldn't go out there, even as the market leader, and say, Arbitrum is the standard. I think that's the wrong approach. We have to have a collaborative, open doors approach that doesn't require you to build on someone else's stack in order to be interoperable. That's not going to win.
But to add to this, I fully agree with the general open approach that has to be done ecosystem-wide. Unfortunately, there are technological nuances that does not allow us to interact between different rollups as seamlessly as you could interact within, say, superchain ecosystem of opchains. Because what superchains are doing is basically the same idea as we introduced with zk-sync for called hyperchains. You take several chains and you put them on a single bridge. And this allows you to not move the underlying assets between the contracts on layer 1. Because if you have like 2 different bridges on layer 1, and you want to and you have like some chains based on those bridges, you want to transact between those chains, you ultimately end up transacting on layer 1. And then it defeats the entire scalability purpose, because every single transaction has to happen on layer 1. But if you have multiple rollups based on a single bridge, then you can transact between them. Like, they have some trust assumptions to each other. They can verify state of each other. They can decide why they want to trust. Is it because the optimistic timeout is out, or because they can verify zero knowledge proofs? And then you don't have to pass any message on layer 1. All you do is you update the root hashes of both of the chains. You only change the commitment for as many transactions as you want. So like this is why we have to innovate and we have to try things out, like with superchains, with hyperchains, with other approaches. And then eventually the approach that is most mature, and we will be all learning from each other, whatever is most mature will have to be adopted as the standard for the ecosystem. Like maybe uprooted to Ethereum itself.
Too early to be talking about standards, kind of.
Probably.
I think we think it's the right time to start talking about them. I think to Steven's point, it's not the right time to start throwing them out and saying, "Hey guys, we've got it all figured out." But I totally agree with that, Alex. Like we do need to start talking about it because the reality is that there are going to be protocol choices that we end up making that influence how bridging and interoperability can work. And
But meanwhile, those choices need to be sort of compatible in some way, right? They have to bridge. They have to communicate.
100%, 100%. But when you're at the point where you're making a choice between the level of compatibility and a protocol change, at some point as a community, we'll have to make a decision. And I tend to agree with Alex that that will be a decision we'll make.
Jordi, you had something to say, I think.
Yeah, it's here. I would like to mention, for example, in 2015, when Vitalik was when Ethereum was about execution environments and connecting things. There were a lot of talks about asynchronous communications between. It was not rollups; it was called execution environments. But a lot of the ideas that happened during those dates can directly be applicable today in today's rollup. So I would just try to get to these old papers, maybe old Vitalik's talk and all this, because there is a lot of information and there is a lot of thoughts that are in there. In this approach, that's very much what Alex was talking about, this centralized bridge or this unique bridge, if you want, where you put all these assets and so on, which this is, I think this is the way, clearly this is the way to go. Here, there are some challenges that needs to be solved on that. I would say, I'm going to say about two important challenges in there. One is the security model. The problem of putting one bridge is what happens if one chain goes wrong. Okay, maybe the full bridge is bad. Okay, and this is something that there are some solutions, but that's a challenge that we need to think about that. So this approach is a way to go. So I fully buy this approach, but again, it's like which rollups are going to be there. The user choose which rollups, and then you have like different tokens running there that with different security conditions in there. So I think it's an important topic, and it's a topic to discuss, and this is a way to go. And the other topic I think Alex also mentioned before, and is this is the problem of the optimistic rollups here. Because optimistic rollups, by definition, you cannot remove funds of the rollup. After this challenging period happens, and this may take a while, you probably can do some optimistic ways to removing these funds, and you can do these complex things, but this makes the things much more difficult to interact. At least if you want to have real, I don't care, if you want to have like real interaction, and you want to maybe send one token now and do some exchange or do some operation there and come back to your original chain. This is the kind of composability that I'm thinking about. Not thinking in, I put this token and then in 2 weeks, this is gonna move to another chain and then it will come back. So I think this is one of the problems that the optimistic rollups have for this interoperability.
It certainly creates a sort of fundamental interoperability problem, right, between an optimistic approach and...
Yeah, but that's why I think that ZK rollups have better options to be interoperable between them if there is collaboration on there. Again, I mentioned some difficulties on there, but I think it's easier that they collaborate and they become a unique system.
Yeah.
That when you put optimistic in there, not because I don't like optimistic, just because this timing. Maybe you can explain what you think about.
Sergey, I'm curious if you have thoughts on like kind of when you have these different, for example, with Axelar, you have different kinds of chains with different finality setups connected. How do you handle that?
Yeah. So for us, I think when we talk about interoperability, we're actually trying to decouple the different layers, right, to enable innovation to happen on all fronts of the stack. So I think a lot of the talk here is about like what is the best sort of validity method, right? And we should continue innovating on those, right? Like there's a path, and then but I think more importantly for us, the question is how do we allow developers to think in a uniform and consistent way across all of these ecosystems? And so while I don't think maybe we're ready to kind of standardize some of this kind of validity stuff, the work should innovate. For developers, I think like standardize very like semantics for how to send messages, right, or communicate across different stacks is not that hard. It's an interface where you can specify, I want to send a message from to, and this is my message, and maybe some arbitrary payload. You can think of it as a TCP/IP type of a packet. How it gets instantiated on the back end through various validity mechanisms like transport layer mechanics, routing mechanics, it's all should be hidden from developers anyways, right? So I think when I think about different layer 2s and different applications, I do think it's potentially is time to standardize sort of the message semantics so the developers don't have to think about all this complexity underneath the hood, allow kind of layer 1s, layer 2s to continue innovating, build their approaches. But at this point, I think developers are really kind of struggling to figure out, right? Like all these mechanics, like they don't want to have to think about different mechanisms under the hood. And so, yeah, I think if we decouple Interop into the layers, I think we can actually progress as an industry.
Want to pause for a second. Any questions from the audience? Anybody that sort of want to raise a hand, jump in? Don't be shy, Call any, bring a mic over your way. This is like, everybody's like, I am still processing this. I have no idea. Okay, all right. I actually have a question specifically about Coinbase Base.
Cool.
I've been learning about it a little bit, and I'm like reading about it. Okay. Why use Ethereum as a gas token? That doesn't seem to make any sense. Why use Ether as a gas token?
Bro, you're asking me to put some real big words in Coinbase's mouth. I'll tell you why Optimism uses Ethereum as a gas token, because it's the logical one. And Ethereum, not compatibility, but equivalence to us is super, super, super.
Why not use a stablecoin or something? If you're
What's that?
Why not use a stablecoin? Like, why not use,
Because Ethereum is good, not because we don't like stability, but because we have a standard built around what Ethereum does and how it functions. And to us, keeping the not just compatibility, but equivalence, staying in as close to the Ethereum's execution environment as possible, is the valid starting point for the community from our perspective. Yeah. And obviously, things like account abstraction will begin to remove the barriers from how you have to pay for gas, right? So, but we have to do that not as our own crazy thing, but in tandem with Ethereum itself.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess. I don't know. I still sort of feel like, in a way, it's like you have two different approaches, like a dApp chain kind of approach, which is like very much Cosmos, and I think Polygon has like begun to work in this area, right, of like different chains on the network that have their own tokens, right, versus this, more, shared token, shared security type of approach.
We started this, but in the ZKVM, for example, it's going to be Ethereum based too. So the ZKVM is going to be the base, the native token is going to be Ethereum too. So it's a matter of usability. So here we want to reduce friction for the user. Right. So for a user having a different token, this is always problematic.
It's huge. Yeah, it's a huge problem.
So it's like, okay, let's skip Matic for the coordination of the network and for the things that are more specific for the infrastructure. But for the end user, it makes a lot of sense to use the token that's that already have. If you are in layer 2, means that you probably be in layer 1, so you have Ethereum. You are developing with Ethereum, so it makes a lot of sense. So here is a decision we took, and I think it's the right decision, because at the end, what you want is the people to use the system. So we are trying to reduce the frictions for the end user as much as we can.
So I guess, maybe kind of lightning round here, like in a world of, 10 years from now, adoption, how many tokens are relevant?
Tokens?
Yeah, how many tokens? Like how many like chain tokens? How many security tokens? Huh.
Or you want to pay with an NFT?
Yeah. All right, let's start on that end.
Okay. All right. Jordi?
As many as necessary. It's just
tens, hundreds.
Yeah, well, there is people that think that every individual should have their own token. So
thousands.
Why not?
Chain layer tokens. How many blockchains with a token?
I expect that it's going to be a reduced set in 3, 4, 5, 10 years should be a handful of tokens.
A handful.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot more chains than that, though.
But but that's what I'm asking, right? Like not necessarily chains, but like chain tokens,
handful
security,
of tokens, yeah.
Security tokens.
Yeah, but you can use tokens for a lot of things, not just for paying the fees.
Exactly.
Like you can if you think about things 5 years from now, you have to reimagine the whole stack completely. Like the user experience is going to be completely seamless. You will not think about seed phrases, paying fees, and any special token, whatever. Like you can do it now in ZK Sync. ZK Sync era implements account abstraction. Mm-hmm. We did it based on EAP 4337. We made some deviations from it to we're a bit on the forefront. We're doing things in experimental ways, and we're in touch with the Ethereum Foundation to bring these experiences back to the to the original standard, but you can't really have the final standard until you start experimenting and start doing something. But you can pay with any token. With like, if you only have USDC, you can just pay in a fraction of that.
So how many blockchains? Sorry, how many tokens providing security to a network in that time?
The security is provided by layer 1 and math. The tokens
like
are not part of security.
One token?
There will be like the token is something that can be used for coordination of decentralized activities. So like for us, we plan to decentralize the sequencer and have a proof of stake mechanism with consensus to decide on what's coming in the blocks, and like not having a sequencer run by a single company with a single API. For that, you will need a token, but not to bother users.
I think there's a technical reason also why Ethereum is a token for rollups, which is our costs are denominated in ETH, right? Remember, rollups post data on Ethereum. So you can introduce another token as the fee token, but you're going to have to do a quick conversion because today the majority of our costs are actually these layer 1 costs. That might change over time, but that's the reality today. So I can say, hey, let's create a rollup and pay in some other token, but then I have to actually go out on layer 1 and pay an ETH, and that's why it just makes sense for rollups to use ETH from a technical perspective.
To use ETH for fees.
Yeah.
So then, I guess Stephen, from your perspective, how many tokens to stake and provide security on a network?
I think I totally agree with Alex and Jordi, which is there will be a lot of tokens. There will be application level tokens, but fundamentally, I believe
excluding those.
Yeah, our security is provided by ETH, right? That's all that we'll need. So if the Ethereum network and the token that powers it is all that we'll need to provide our security. There are lots of other reasons why others will introduce tokens, as we've said, and I don't want to regurgitate. But yeah, I think ETH is primarily, if you're a rollup on Ethereum, I should say ETH is the primary token. I'm sure there will be other layer 1s, but I think Ethereum will dominate over time. At least that's my thesis, and I think probably the thesis of most of us here on the
Sounds that way, yeah. I think so. I think
it'd be hard to be an L2 without having that thesis.
I guess that's right. I guess that makes sense. Yeah. Sergey? I think Sergey's answer might be different.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think it's not a question of how many tokens. I think it's a question of what is the user experience at the end of the day, like everybody else said here, right? And I think, even today, like actually we're talking about like ETH, but the reality is like people actually have to like bridge their ETH to each one of these L2s, right? Like figure out how to move it back and forth and all of that. So I'm looking forward to more like account abstraction types of paradigms where like whatever token you want to use, you actually use it for utility, right? Like I want to use this token for security. I want to use this token to decentralize the sequence. I want to use this token to I don't know, do another function on the network, but like that should just be sort of abstracted away from the user experience.
So at the like proof of stake layer, tokens you could stake, right? Tokens that you could use to provide security on a network. How many do you think there would be in that long-term time horizon?
In ETH ecosystem or across? All abroad. Good question. I would say dozens, maybe 100 plus.
Oh, good. Okay. Yes.
Oh, now we got questions.
But yeah, now we got some questions. Kind of right there in the middle, in the back row there. We really probably only have time for one. Here comes the mic. Wait for the mic, please.
You mentioned decentralizing the sequencer, and so would love to hear any updates on that, as well as upgradability, and like how that factors into decentralization, specifically on L2s.
Can I start? Yeah. Decentralized sequencer. Well, we will start with a centralized sequencer. I think this is because mainly what we are having a CK rollup, but the idea is to decentralize this sequencer. At the end, you can understand the sequencer as a consensus. It's a consensus system where you have the trilemma properties and even some more like finality and so on. But this is a temporary assumptions. So if you have a centralized sequencer, actually you have a consensus system. It's called the dictatorship consensus. It's whatever says the dictator is whatever happens. This is but it's a consensus system. But you can replace, quite easily, this consensus with a decentralized, with a consensus layer, just for this temporary moment. In Polygon, we have a lot of experience in building this. I would say intermediary, not perfect consensus, but if you want consensus systems that are in regions with different balances in the trilemma. And here, one of the reasons why it's going to be many rollups is because, especially the user may choose different sequencers, different kinds of sequencers. For some applications, maybe they just prioritize just of high finality. They don't care about security.
And user, you mean the developer, right?
Yeah. I'm talking users, developer. Yeah. Users of the rollup. Yeah. So the developers, but then the applications that they are building, which makes sense.
Right.
It's everything, all the chain that goes behind. But it's going to be applications that they will prioritize high finality, less security, or more centralization, and it's going to be some applications that will prioritize maybe high security and things. And here should be, for me, one of the other challenges is if we can have a single system with a multi-sequencer, or with a sequencer that the user can choose what priorities they want to use. I think this is an open challenge on that, because right now it's like you choose which sequencing you have, or you either have different chains and so on. So this is, but at the end, user will choose. So at the end, the user, the developer, the users will choose which decentralized sequencer we'll use. And we started with a centralized sequencer, which is the easiest one, but we will extend that.
Good. I think that's all we have time for. So I apologize. We just got kind of spicy and lit at the end there. So, maybe we can continue the conversation in the crowd here. Thanks very much to the panelists. Everybody, please give a round of applause.